Hi, I can actually share it this time. So I did this whole live stream setup, and I invited like 50 people, right? I know you guys, and my face just popped up on your computer, so I just started talking shit. So I set up this whole live video to read Beneath the Pavement, the Beast. And I invited a bunch of people. I wrote this whole long essay thing, and then I realized that the privacy was set to only me. So I'm sure, I don't know if you guys got a couple tags that led nowhere or not, but that's definitely what happened. So I'm going to start reading in a little while as soon as I grab some viewers. Let me double check to make sure that I'm actually getting, that it did not do that again. Facebook, as you know, is quite difficult when it wants to be. Oh no, cool. I have a viewer. There we are. So that means it's not private, which is good. I'm going to leave a comment on this though, because I cannot share this to the groups that I want to share it to. So I'm going to tag a couple people to share it for me. And we will get to what we're going to do, reading in just a second. So thank you for your patience. Please drop down and, well, if you have a beer, cheers. And relax and hang out with me. I'm going to be reading this and talking about it in 2 seconds. Can you share this with DKMU and Hexorius? Okay, so to my last little commentary, because I'm going to take about 2 or 3 minutes before I start to read to get everybody settled, because I just sent an invite link out. Good afternoon. I hope you guys are healthy, safe, having a great time. Cheers. So what inspired this is in a group called the DKMU, for you guys don't know about that. It's a chaos magic movement, you could say, just kind of like a group of people who do experimental magic. One of the offshoots of that is a movement called Hexorius. Now the DKMU, one of the main things that they do is they have systems that developed what they call god forms, which are like gods, but they're kind of like interfaces that are unique masks for archetypical and divine forces to be interacted with using their own systems that are developed, new by the members of DKMU and other chaos magic groups. I'm trying to generally state that. But Hexorius is a god form / equation / spell work that essentially is connecting a magician to not only the spirit of the city, but the magical underground of the city, which might be kind of a hard concept to get if you're not a huge occult nerd, but it kind of stems back to the idea that everything has a spirit of place, a genus loci, everything has a spirit in it, and that spirit can be communicated with, and cities especially are huge metropolises that as groups of people gather over them, oftentimes they are unknowingly or knowingly set on, of course, land that has its own spirits, it has its own attributes, and it has its own loci and places of power that forms this network and community, which exists in the human world. It also exists in the spirit world and gets more layered and denser. And it's kind of like the idea of every city has its own underground, its own goblin streets. And for intentional or unconscious magicians, or anybody really in the right state of mind and with the right intention, you can kind of unlock this otherworld or this shadow of a city, not only interact with it, but travel with it, and sometimes bring things back to the real world. So this Hexorian movement, I think, is really cool. They've designed a god form and a glyph system, and, basically an entire movement of people working with this idea that they can tap into Hexorius, which is like a god form interface. It's not exactly the spirit of the city, but it's like a node that is intelligent and willful on its own that can be worked with to travel to or interact with the shadow side, the magical goblin market side of any given community. So interestingly, I'm going to be reading from Generation Hex, which again is an assortment and anthology of a bunch of different young occult authors back in the early 2000s, put together by a guy named Jason Louv. I don't really know what he's up to these days, but back then he wrote some good stuff. And so again, this was a really cool assorted look into just people who are living magic, from like 17 to the early 20s, just rando people random magicians, and it was kind of a cool vision into that time period of the end of the 90s, post Y2K. The occult world back then was very undefined, and it was kind of like the effects of a lot of the old guard occult orders, like the Golden Dawn and the Lima and the OTO specifically, and then on the other side of that, like Wicca and stuff like that, they'd kind of started giving way. The internet was producing all this new talent and new voices, you know, from alt.magic, the news groups, and as the web solidified. Hello, spider. So I'm in my basement. I always get little Anansi friends. Talking about webs, of course I get, every time I talk about Ellis or DKMU, which uses a symbolism of the web quite a bit, I always have like little baby spiders. Some in the basement, they visit. Move them so I don't hit them with my arms. But I hope you guys are doing well. I'm going to read this anthology piece, this essay called Beneath the Pavement, The Beast, by a guy named Stephen Grasso. So for people who are interested in the Hexorian movement, and I'll probably explain that really badly, but it struck me as I was reading it, and again, I haven't read this since I was like 19. I was a very neophytish mage, and now I'm quite older. I want to revisit it, and, you know, I've noticed that some of the ideas here, which have naturally occurred to other magicians 20 years ago, are recreated and start manifesting in the works of magicians today. And it is kind of empowering, and it's kind of important to realize that our history is living, and that the ideas we have are their communications. A lot of times when it comes to magic, the gods are trying to teach us, and we are trying to learn, and vice versa. And it's not, you know, ideas, especially magic ones, are living concepts in their currents. And I think Hexorius is a very old current, a communication between humans and the spirits of the places where they dwell. And how things like cities have a interesting and unique evolution in a way that, you know, it's just interesting. We can explore it. I also want to touch, and I will touch later, one of my favorite books growing up was Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, who wrote American Gods and Sandman, which was, well, I'll get into that. But it's, again, another one of those really resonant pieces of fiction that kind of takes this old idea of the underworld and the city behind the city and things like that. So, hi. Kind of like a Platon, yeah, the world of ideas, but a little different from that. So now that you guys are here, I won't bore you any longer. And the one thing I will say, once I'm in live stream, my laptop is currently resetting, so I'm not able to share this to the groups I originally shared this to. I will do it later. But Yave, and anybody else who are in DKMU, Sorcerer's Guild, or anything like that, please share this live stream there, because I can't do it yet until I'm done. So, thank you, and I will begin. So, cheers again. Get my voice on. Beneath the Pavement, The Beast, by Stephen Grasso. Magic is not located in textbooks available on the high street. It does not exist within codified and rehearsed ritual, and you can't buy it on your credit card. Magic is a ferocious and mysterious beast, and its secrets and powers must be earned through blood, sweat, and tears. It is something that you live, not something that you read about and study. Magic is everywhere and within everything, and the works of a magician is to perceive it and to interact with it. There is magic in the sea at night, in a flight of ravens, in the motion of traffic, in dark alleys, filthy sewers, and bright shop doorways. There is magic in abandoned subway stations, riverbanks, and public parks. The world is alive with magic. Are you brave enough to step outside and into it? The term derive, or drift, was first coined by the Situationist International, who would go for long, aimless walks around their towns and cities, reimagining the concrete tower blocks, cenotaphs, and public fountains as castles of wisdom, wishing spikes and ponds of eternal youth. The purpose of the drift was to see beauty in the urban landscape and to conquer the tyranny of grim, oppressive town planning through the transformative power of imagination. Through the technique of the drift, the Situationists could radically change their experience of the city and turn drab stretches of urban decay into a magical landscape of limitless wonder and enchantment. Yet they perhaps stopped short of taking the exercise to its logical conclusion. Once you have peeled back the dreary concrete mask of the world and uncovered a magical kingdom crawling with spirits, the next stage is to see what you can do within that world, to work out how to speak to those spirits and find out what they might be able to do for you. The technique of the drift does not merely reveal magic, but is a process of engaging with it. It has many different applications and can be used in a variety of contexts. It can be used as a direct method of communication with a spirit or genus loci of a particular location or a geographical area, or indeed as a means of dialogue with any entity you are working with. It can be used as a method of collecting potent ingredients and materials for sorcery workings, or to seek answers to divinatory questions. The practical applications of the drift are numerous, and the imaginative magician will undoubtedly unlock many more. It can be performed in virtually any location and at a moment's notice. Hence, it is ideally suited for those situations when you are caught unprepared. You need to work some powerful magic on the fly. Pause. Hello, all of you, and thank you of Yahweh. Hello, Joseph, and thank you, Jean Manuel and Ariana, and whoever else. Hello, thank you for joining, and cheers. It's so sour. What is this? It is Owen's Craft Mixers, ginger beer and lime. Tasty. The mechanics of the drift are simple. You are attempting to walk between worlds and bring something useful back with you. It is essentially a shamanic journey that takes place physically in real time, as opposed to an internal journey, such as the drumble trances of indigenous tribes like the Javara. The drift forces you out of your comfortable, centrally heated temple space, and puts you on the spot like few other occult practices. It gets your magic out into the world in a very real and very physical sense. A drift can begin in several different ways, depending on the situation and the intent. Sometimes drifts can be spontaneous. If you have sufficiently internalized the practice, it is not uncommon to find yourself kicked into a full-on shamanic drift at virtually any moment. Going out to buy a pint of milk, walking home from the pub, or visiting the shops can often be transformed into heavy magic without a minute's notice. The spontaneous drift can sharpen up your sensitivity and adaptability to a very high degree. But to get the best from it, you need to be able to receive and filter information in an effective manner. The drift is a high-risk occult practice as far as your sanity goes, as it encourages a scary level of openness to spirit communication. Before you know it, you're the mad guy speaking with invisible beings on the high street and going through the bins looking for occult secrets. This kind of thing is pretty much par for the course of this sort of work, so to begin with, it's useful to learn a method of switching it on and off. It's important to remember that what you are doing is attempted to walk between worlds, with an emphasis on the word between. It's relatively easy to go off the deep end with this practice and become a paranoid lunatic remarkably quickly, but that's not the point of the exercise. It's your skill as a magician that allows you to safely navigate the wilder areas of consciousness and bring back something useful. To become accomplished at the drift, you have to develop sufficient skill at mediating between your normal day-to-day consciousness and existence and the hyper-real shamanic experience. In order to begin the drift, you should look for an appropriate starting place, a physical access point that will allow you to enter into shamanic or magical reality and return again when your business is done. The most immediate and accessible crossover point into shamanic reality is, of course, the crossroads. Every inhabited location will have a crossroads of one form or another within walking distance, and the crossroads is the supreme symbol of intercession between worlds. However, any work involving the crossroads falls firmly within the territory of the various gods, goddesses, saints, spirits, and mysteries associated with it. You need to ask their permission before you can go through the gate. This is easier to accomplish if you already have a working relationship with one or more of these entities. The general modus operandi would be to make appropriate offerings to them at their spot, and then ask if they will open the doorway for you, allowing you to go through and accomplish the intent of your drift. You should seek their blessing for your journey, and ask them to ensure your safe return. The mysteries of the crossroads are essential to the operation of this work, although it is possible to begin a shamanic drift in a more free-form style, utilizing a physical crossover point such as a gateway, railway arch, narrow alleyway, or similar symbolic route. These structures still fall into the domain of the crossroads at an esoteric level. Therefore, if the entire operation is performed under the specific auspices of a crossroads entity, with both their permission and their involvement, you are likely to get far more effective results. Once offerings have been made and permission has been granted, you can begin your drift. Depart from your access point, either walking through the gateway, arch, or leaving the crossroads in a different direction to which you arrive. You are now entering shamanic reality. In the early stages of the drift, you should begin tuning into your environment. Pay close attention to what's going on around you and try to read the language of the city, or wherever you may be. Look out for any strange graffiti, headlines on discarded newspaper, unusual words or phrases that leap out at you from otherwise innocuous sources, and so on. Pay attention to snatches of overheard conversation, the lyrics of songs echoing from car radios, or announcements from train stations and the like. You are looking for a sign or signal that can be readily interpreted in relation to your intent. Don't try to force it or just make something up to fit. Relax into the drift and wait for something to come through of its own accord. The process of the drift is a two-way dialogue with the spirits. You might have to be patient, but you will know when you're on the right track. The first piece of information that comes through will either answer your question right off the bat, or else it will lead you on the next stage in your journey. Sometimes drifts can be resolved very quickly. For example, within minutes of leaving the access point, you see a random piece of street art that answers your question in no uncertain terms. If this happens, then simply return to the crossroads. Thank the spirits and ask them to close the door for you. Sometimes it's just that simple. Frequently, however, the first signal that you receive will point you somewhere else, or only give you part of the story, leading you further down the road to look for more clues. You should eventually start to get a sense that you are following a symbolic thread through the city. Each sign you receive brings you a little further towards your eventual destination and the realization of your intent. Sometimes you might lose the plot completely and find yourself clueless as to where you ought to go. If this happens, just relax and tune back in. And try to pick up the thread again and get back to the right track. Occasionally the spirits might throw you a curveball. For example, you might pick up a fragment of map that strongly suggests you need to get on a bus to the other side of the town in order to complete your quest. Or you could find yourself going on an elaborate and exhausting journey across the city, only to find what you were looking for outside your own front door. Anything can happen during a drift. You're stepping into a zone of increased potential and should be prepared for any eventual outcome. One of the biggest obstacles to successful drifting is your own self-consciousness. The message of the drift might clearly indicate that you do something a part of you balks at. You might be required to steal something conspicuous from a public place, or behave in a highly unusual manner at an extremely inappropriate location. Often, all that can be done in these circumstances is to go beyond whatever ingrained social conditioning your actions have disturbed and take a leap of faith in the name of magic. It is actually surprising what you can get away with in public without anyone batting an eyelid, particularly in a major city. The drift can sometimes be hard work, and if you don't come up against the occasional "what the fuck am I doing" moment, then you're not fully engaging with the process. A useful psychological trick for getting beyond any embarrassment or self-consciousness is to put aside the intent of the drift for a moment and just consider the whole thing as an abstract exercise in deconditioning. If you find yourself hesitating over some fairly inoffensive but extremely peculiar action, for example, picking up an old shoe in broad daylight and swapping it with your own, or acquiring an oddly resonant object from the center of a busy roundabout, then you're inadvertently uncovered something very interesting about yourself. You've discovered one of the walls of your personality, something that sets limits on what you personally consider to be acceptable public behavior. What is it doing there? What purpose is it serving? Look closely at the range of emotional responses you've tapped into and see what you can discover about yourself. The process of trying to move beyond one of these tiny barriers in order to acquire a power object could well be considered a powerful shamanic act in its own right. One of the most difficult and complex aspects of this work is knowing how to strike the right balance between moving with the flow of events and tailoring what happens towards your ultimate goal. It's just as easy to be distracted by tangential phenomena and forget why you were drifting in the first place, as it is to be so completely focused on your intent that important material is overlooked. Getting the right balance only really comes from experience and practice, so don't be too hard on yourself to begin with. Go where the drift takes you, but always keep in mind your reasons for embarking on the journey. If you feel yourself straying too far from the path, don't be afraid to gently guide yourself back on course. If any odd or tangential material comes through that seems unconnected to your goal, just make a note of it for further investigation at a later date. Another separate drift may be required to uncover its mysteries. To put some of this into context, here are a few practical examples of situations in which the drift can be utilized. The method is ideally suited to divinatory workings, particularly if you need to get a quick answer to an important question, but don't have access to paraphernalia such as tarot cards or runestones. A short divinatory drift can be employed during a lunch break, on the journey home from work, or in any situation where you need to gather information at short notice via non-ordinary means. Excuse me. It requires little in the way of planning or preparation. Simply visit the crossroads, make your offerings, ask the question, and see what comes through. A related information gathering drift practice is the underworld divination, which can be employed in any city that has an underground tube or metro station. Begin the drift near the subway entrance and literally envision your descent into the tube system as a shamanic journey to the underworld for hidden knowledge. You are descending to an alien landscape of white-tiled walls, harsh fluorescent lights, and metal worms that burrow through the earth, carrying semi-conscious human cargo. Ride the tube lines until you get the answer you're looking for. Converse with its denizens, read its walls, listen to its voices, and try to understand its language. You might want to leave a coin with an underground busker or beggar as payment for any information you receive. A drift can also be utilized if you need to work some spontaneous sorcery and don't have access to whatever tools or temple space you might normally employ. You should begin the drift in the usual manner and ask to be guided towards ingredients for a grizz bag or similar fetish item, which at a push could be constructed from a sheet of paper or small carrier bag tied up with an elastic band or piece of string. You walk the streets until you find a specific number of items for the bag, all of which should, or at some level, correlate to your intent. The ingredients could be anything from curious plants growing beneath paving stones, to sigils derived from graffiti seen on walls, to just about anything that feels right or manifests itself to you in an odd way. The more often you work with a drift, the better you tend to become at recognizing and acquiring what you need. After a while, you may even find yourself developing a language of ingredients to use in work of this nature. As always, resist the temptation to just arbitrarily make up a list of aesthetically pleasing correspondences. Hoodoo ingredients should be revealed to you through the living shamanic process of working the drift. If you want to cobble together a symbol system one afternoon over a cup of tea and some biscuits, then that's fine, but you're only shortchanging yourself and not fully engaging with what you might call shamanic reality. Hoodoo correspondences can't be invented after the fact. They must be revealed to you directly by the spirits during the drift in the heat of the moment. That's what invests them with power and meaning. If you skip that section and just casually decide that, say, cigarette ends represent the shell of a human soul, then you're distilling all the magic out of the process. Magic takes place in the wild and unpredictable territories, outside of the individual ego, and you can't get anywhere near those areas unless you relax the controls and let the material emerge on its own accord. Once you've drifted for the ingredients to go in your makeshift sorcery bag, you might then look for an appropriate power spot to construct and charge it. If you are not yet familiar with the psychogeography of an area, let the drift itself guide you to an appropriate place. You could make offerings to the spirits associated with that specific area, or to whatever gods or goddesses you may regularly work with, and ask them if they will empower the bag for you. This could involve leaving it concealed at a particular spot, and returning after a set period of time to pick it up. Or it could mean walking counterclockwise around the statue or building 7 or 9 times with the bag in your hand, or any number of possible formulae. Speak to the spirits, listen to what they have to say, and don't make any deals that you are unwilling to follow through on. If you plan on working regularly with the drift method, you should gradually start to get a feel for the occult landscape of the city where you live. Try to find out as much as you can about the local history. Look at old maps of the area. Spend lots of time drifting and get to know the landscape, the environment, and its ecosystems inside out. There might be an old crossroads, a standing stone, ancient patch of woodland, beautiful river, creepy hospital, wishing well, haunted castle, or potent nightclub in your town. Pay attention to whatever happens in these places. Visit them often, speak to the spirits that dwell there, and seek to make allies of them. Accept responsibility for the patch where you live and operate. Step into the role of local magician in your area. Make friends with the powers that are already there, and try to broker mutually beneficial relationships with them. Listen to what they want from you, and always keep your end of the bargain. There is always sacrifice, and you get nothing for nothing. If you prove you are willing to address the concerns of your town, it will be more likely to cooperate with you. Discover what arrangements the ghosts and spirits of your city are prepared to make with you, and what gifts they may be willing to bestow. There is no rulebook or step-by-step guide to how this kind of work will play out, as it is with all personal relationships and direct interaction. All that can be given are hints and pointers based on experience. This guide has been written primarily from the perspective of the urban magician, but its principles can just as easily be applied to a rural setting or to whatever environment you find yourself living in. If you live outside of the city, you may find that information emerges via phenomena, such as the flight of birds, arrangements of twigs in the earth, or on the earth, cloud formations, shapes made by driftwood on the beach, or any number of environmental factors. Try experimenting in different settings and locations to see what comes through. You could speculate that the series of peculiar omens, superstitions, and old wives' tales that have been handed down to us by successive generations are the remnants of codified information derived via methods such as the drift. So by engaging with this process yourself, you are building a direct relationship with both the land you live on and the environment in which you operate as a magician. You're developing a living shamanism that has nothing to do with the various Reconstructionist, neo-pagan traditions that flood the occult scene, but grows out of the same methods that shamans have always worked with, going out into the wilderness, speaking with spirits, and returning with knowledge and power. That has been Beneath the Pavement, the Beast, by Stephen Grasso. So, what did you guys think? Especially you Hexorian mages, even if you're not here in the live stream. You just watch it later. I still want to hear what you think. That kind of hit me as a really big synchronicity, because I was looking over some of the Hexorian stuff, since its inception I've been interested in it, because it's always been a technique I've utilized in my personal practice. It's just powerful. It's I would even say generic in its importance. You're welcome, Yahweh. What did you think? Especially, I wouldn't mind. Cool. I'm glad you guys enjoyed that. And I think a lot of us key into that technique in that practice, which is again general and I think maybe universal to humanity. Like even when we go out in nature, like I know that even without magical intent, some of my favorite times are just getting lost in the woods, and the idea of losing yourself, intentionally removing the pattern and direction of where you're going, is potent. Just, you know, putting your perception, putting the idea that the world around you, the trees, the stones, the sticks, the river, the sky, all the different spirits that may dwell there, they're living and they're communicating, and you're in an ecosystem. Just like you'd be at a mall and you're surrounded by people. And even then, cities, the sidewalk, the subway, the sewers, all of these concepts have a bit of potency in them. They all have a bit of consciousness on their own terms with them. And there are great spirits and spirit courts that exist in all places. And us as magicians, as humans, which everyone has the right to magic, we have the ability to reach out and find communication with them. Yep. So, and that exists, you know, it's mentioned, you guys are writing about it, like as an unconscious tactic, and that a lot of power can come through this, the subconscious. Now, I tend to believe that, you know, magic and spirits are not directly an internal force, but I believe our subconscious and our internal body holds the ability to form dialogues with them and learn in ways our conscious mind doesn't always realize, but we still learn, absorb, and express ourselves with. So, you know, something we used to do, I like long drives. I like listening to music in the middle of the night and driving around the country and getting lost. Me and my brother and friends have done this for a long time, years. And I've found some of my favorite and most potent, beloved sacred spaces to me doing just that. My favorite was a place that I've been going to for 15 years that I do a lot of rituals at. It's a place deep in the country, and I've nicknamed it Land of the Dead. And I don't really tell anybody where it is, but I remember once me and a friend were driving, and he was driving, and I was kind of just spacing out. And I don't know if you ever did the whole, like, you just held your hand up and let spirit kind of guide you. And, you know, in my head I intentionalized, show me the most spiritually potent area within 20 miles. And I let my hand guide me, like, turn left here, turn right there, and, you know, this way, and just let that pull divorced from my conscious mind. And eventually we found ourselves, you know, on this back road, and I kind of looked up at a time, and all the trees were bent over this one-lane road that was curving through the deepest back country. And I looked up and I got this impression of this tunnel leading down. And, you know, I recalled that statement somewhere that all journeys to the underworld start with movement through a tunnel, separating this world from the land of the dead. And there's always this idea of moving through a tunnel into a different space that marks underworld journeys, both in mythology and psychology and spirit work. So kind of in my mind, I was like, this place, this is the land of the dead. And then when I did that, just tuning in, that place had that otherness which you look for, and eventually we came to a certain spot that it was only 15 years later I realized was a spirit crossroads. The road crossed a different kind of road, and the place has always been potent to me, and found others, and you can find them too. You don't have to just be walking around your city, you can drive. You just have to allow yourself to get lost. You have to allow yourself to be led, and that is important. And I agree with that author that it is a keystone of the shamanic journey. And it's not always safe. You have to get up and go do magic. You have to go out and do work. So I'd be interested to hear all your guys' stories. Maybe not all of them, because I know most of you guys probably have a ton of them. But what you guys think. You know, also comment, I mentioned one of my favorite books, the first book I ever read by author Neil Gaiman, who's a wonderful storyteller, like a true prophet. He's a bard, 100% arch bard, as somebody said before. Like, I love Neil Gaiman. His American Gods, his Sandman, that man is tuned into power and story. But Neverwhere was originally, I think, a BBC dramatization, but, you know, he wrote it, but then wrote it into a novel, and it was beautiful, especially as a teenager at the time when I read it. And like a lot of us, you know, a lot of us are kind of lost in finding ourselves when we're young adults and teenagers, and I was no different. And it was before I really came into my own as a magician, and I had found that. But, you know, the idea behind that story is you have, a regular guy in London, and he's, normal guy. I think he was getting engaged or something like that. And he's got his whole life. He's got his boring job. He's making his money. He's got his whole life planned. He's walking down the street, and suddenly this like weird chick with weird hair and raggedy clothing just kind of like runs into him, and she's running from something, and she's terrified. And he's like, well, I'll help you. And he ends up getting pulled into this place called London Below, which is like a magical fairyland that exists below London, not only physically, but in like an etheric realm. And once you enter that place, you disappear from London above, the normal world. Like, everybody forgets who you are. You are displaced from your life like you never really existed. Like, the world forgets you, and you integrate into London Below. And it's like, filled with fantastic characters and goblin markets, and it's just a fantastic story. Like, go read Neverwhere. But that is a really good example of, again, Arcadia, like a fairyland, the otherland. Like, once you eat the fruit of the underworld, and once you eat, the food of fairy, you're divorced from our world, and you are in some ways now immortal, and you have power, and you are among the good folk now, but you can't really ever come back, in a way that once you kind of enter that shamanic pact with the universe, you are in that part of you, you've kind of signed, not in like a devil contract kind of way, but like, once you've seen things and you've learned the ability to perceive them, like, you'll always seek it. It'll always be a part of you. And it's a really important part of us, because I think that a lot of people are naturally supposed to be able to interact with the world in that level, but we've forgotten over the last couple thousand years. Like, I think that in the origins of humanity, I believe that's the first magic, was that, because we were just, tribal people without any really understanding of the universe in a scientific way. Hunter-gatherers. Like, we had our small tribes and villages, and we had fire, and then the rest of the world was unknown. It went on for infinity of just wildness and beauty, and you didn't understand weather. You didn't know what kind of predators were out there. You didn't know, even, you had your oral traditions that these berries would kill you, these berries would not. So, our ability, we developed consciousness, and with that, I think our spirits always had that ability, maybe as animals, to kind of tune into the intelligences of nature. And as we grew conscious, that grew too. And we learned how to speak to the spirits of land and the spirits of place. And, we learned to give them something, and they would be kind to us. Be like, hey, we gave a sacrifice to the spirit of a portion of the jungle, and the jungle returned and said, eat these fruits, but not these, or you will die. And it gave us, in that way, the spirits gave us the gift of life. And that's one theory. And I think a lot of the shamans would do that, not only using maybe psychedelics, but just into that normal, intuitive, shamanic journey space. So, last year in the quarantine, I began using Randonautica app, and I found very interesting places, including a cabin lost in the woods perfectly usable. Running water. I'm reading Yahweh Alexander. Running water, electricity, and all the stuff. Now me and my people call it the Hexorian cabin. Neverwhere is a great book. I read it some years ago. Yep. I also believe every human city has a below counterpart. I think it's a little different from the normal otherworld or layers of spirit and spiritual reality that you find everywhere. I think there's an added depth and energy to cities that are just unique because humans make cities. There is just something about the power of years and generations and work and every emotion and belief and power of, thousands of people over generations, putting their blood, sweat, and tears into the city and living and dying and with other conflicts, in addition to the spirits of that land and how they form, because spirits are often very symbiotic with us. They evolve as we do. It is not, despite what we think, it is not necessarily, a separate relationship. In the best sense, spirits exist in the land, are affected by it, and they're affected by us, just like we are affected by them. And the land is affected by them, regardless of what people can perceive. So a city is like, a burning, melting pot, an alchemical work on a level that, like, I think city magic and city shamanism and things like Hexorius are essential. Like, we're going to learn a lot in both occult, in an occult sense, from exploring this and seeing what cities can offer. in addition to normal things like the drift. But yeah, I think all cities have a below. I think all cities have a goblin market, and they're amazingly potent places to connect in, not with your own subconscious, but with the spirits of the land and the genus loci. And I used to do it all the time ever since I was younger, and a lot of my friends have too. You know, I live in Baltimore now, but I've explored a lot of cities, and the most potent one that I've been to, without question, even bigger than New York in certain ways, is New Orleans. And I think anybody who lives in New Orleans or has or spent time there, it's like a second nature. They're like, oh yeah, spirit, the city's alive. There are many spirits here from different times, but the city itself is alive and filled, and it's old and it's powerful. And the city has a voice and a personality, and it reflects what you think. Like, in my opinion, as a non-native of New Orleans who's visited and done magical work there, and experienced my own drift, my own encounter with what I might call Hexorius, without knowing, I think this was before Hexorius was a thing. Like, I remember I was going to New Orleans under the pretenses, I won't tell the whole story, but the pretenses of that I was going through some trauma. I'll put it this way, I was healing from trauma, and it was a healing that was taking several years, and it had divorced me from my ability to do magic in a lot of ways, to feel spirit, and it was a very dark time. And I had come to that point where I was angry, and I was sick of being disconnected, and I was sick of feeling that level of depression and half-deadness, and I knew I was going to go to New Orleans, and the idea was saying that I was either going to live or die. I knew in my heart that, like, kind of this trip was going to decide on a lot of levels for me. I don't know how that sounds, but, and I did, and it was an interesting 3 weeks. Like, I met a very crazy hereditary rich witch who was a bartender there, and we had some adventures, and it was kind of culminated into dropping several tabs and being kind of lost in the back streets way outside of the French Quarter, and met her where the streets contracted, where we walked 3 blocks to get to where we're going, and then when I left, it was 18 or 19 blocks to where we had left. So the only thing I'll say without spoiling the whole thing, which involved hexed cats, that be aware, like, this book and essay talks about the drift, like, it's a very potent magical process, but it's not necessarily a tame one. Like, you're talking about the city. Cities can be dangerous as much as they can be beautiful normally. But when you're engaging the shamanic level of a city and its spirits, like, people, a lot of people, I think, in, like, the New Age communities or the manifestation crowds, they don't, like, a lot of them interact in a very, I don't mean this in an insulting way, like a very internal, superficial level of magic, where a lot of it is just kind of psychology. It's just kind of like, you know, manifesting good thoughts and law of attraction. But, like, it can't be stressed enough, like, things like this, you are interacting with living spirits who are very old, and it's very real. You sometimes encounter that on an internal level, but we're talking about things like your reality, or maybe at the very least your deepest perceptions of it, but I want to say your actual reality shifts on, like, a metaphysical level, and that can happen to you, where it's like, no matter how good your directions are, like when I was lost on those back streets, I felt like a magical effect around me, like it was an intentional thing. And I remember looking at the Google Maps on my phone, instinctively knowing that, just knew, like, whatever it is, like, my intuition as a major is like, it framed in mind like, you're in a loop. And that was kind of scary. And I pulled up my Google Maps to try and find my way back to where I was, but I instinctively knew it wouldn't work. So my Google Maps would, like, lend me walking through these streets, and I'd walk 3 blocks. And then I realized the maps had swapped around. Like, I wasn't getting anywhere. I kept going, like, just looping around the same 3 blocks for like 3 or 4 times. And there was a point where I breathed, centered, put my phone away, and at that point I hadn't practiced heavy magic in a long time, because a part of me was disconnected because of, like, a traumatic wound. And I breathed, and I'd spent a lot of time learning about New Orleans as a city, and, you know, talking to the spirits, just saying hello, and I had already stated kind of my intent. And I breathed, and I felt this feeling in me that I hadn't felt in a while, and it was like, hey, just trust your shit. Like, you have that ability. You're a magician. You've done magic and gone through way worse adventures than this for years. You got this. And I breathed, put my phone away, and just kind of walked. I let kind of, like, I put that glamour around myself because it was like 2 in the morning and I was by myself and I was, for all intents and purposes, a tourist. And I could feel those eyes because, like, you know, that's not a place you know. And there's things, you know, those places can be dangerous. So I put that glamour around myself and I kind of extended myself and, you know, I walked through it. And eventually, because I learned the street names, I found myself back to where I was going. But only after I kind of trusted my own magic and kind of asked the city. I was like, hey, you know, let's do it on this level. And as soon as I interact with that level, I don't know, that probably sounds really strange coming, but I think if you're a magician who's been in that state, you know exactly what I mean. And it's interesting. So I want to do this live stream, and I wanted to thank you for listening to that, especially for you Hexorian guys and gales and thems. And I hope you had a beer. So I'll shut up for like 2 seconds, and if you guys want to have some talking points or ask questions, do so in the comments right now. And I think I did say, if I had some time, I would do some quick divinations for you. That means I'm not doing tarot today, but I will be doing some pendulum divinations, which is my current main focus for divinations. They're about magical stuff. I love you. I don't know if I'll debate if I want to answer any mundane questions because I'm kind of in a state of mind. But say hello to my pendulum. It holds my familiar spirit in it. Her name's Amethyst. She's an amethyst. So feel free to ask. I got time for a couple before I can head off. Thanks to you. Great talk. Yave, we should probably correspond more often. I feel like I could have stole that New Orleans story in a better way. Maybe I will sometime. So, but, you know, I don't want to make it all about my backstory. Hello, Oriana. I was going to give you some divination privately later. You asked me a question without actually giving me any details. So, but if you're on my comments, you can... I give you one question. Well, thank you, Agape. I hear my voice is trash. But if not for that, if you guys are still here and want something to do, I suppose I could read another shorter thing. So I did a live stream like last week, and I read the first 2 chapters of the Mothman Prophecies. And that book's all about high strangeness and cryptids and the intersection of just weird dimensional shit into our reality that's weird even from occult standards. And kind of part of that is, it's a very tinfoil hat. Kind of like, this is some tinfoil hat shit beyond most tinfoil hat shit. And then it kind of gives you cause on, you know, it is. But then I realized a couple days later, I posted the video, it was up, people were watching it, and then suddenly Facebook's like, your video, there was an error with your video. There wasn't an error, but Facebook decided after 3 days there was. They were like, click here for more information. You clicked it, and it was just like, error message. And the whole video just vanished. It wasn't a video that was, you know, it was shared to like 4 groups, and the whole video was gone off the post. It wasn't even like an error video. So I kind of had that joke though, like, man, because that book talks about like things like the Men in Black and kind of intricate intelligences fucking with people who look into the phenomena altogether. I was like, the Facebook Men in Black got me. I really do want to read more Mothman though. Yave, what you got? Well, Ariana, make a summary after. Yeah, if you want to ask me a question, let's see how susceptible we are to it. How do you feel about answering Yave's question? Oh, hello, Agape. Oh, yes, happy birthday. And me and Jonathan aren't super well acquainted, but, you know, from what I see, he's a really friendly guy, so hello. And I hope you guys have a wonderful full moon shindig and get some awesome magic done. You can ask it in your mind, and I will give you whatever answer I get. Let's ask the spirit. Let's ask the spirit of knowledge. Would you rather he ask in his mind? All right, I've gotten an affirmative. Just tell me when you've projected With your psychic mind beam, you'll question at me, and I will give you the answer. Can't promise it'll be accurate, but we can try. I think it might be. It might be. I'm often surprised. Ariana, did you endanger yourself with your magical working? Ariana or Minton? That's a no. Was the intent of your desperate spell, is it probable to, let me frame that, is it probable to manifest in the way you need it to? And that is an affirmative. I'll ask this, Ariana, did you put yourself in any specific danger or overtaxation because of your magic? That is an affirmative. Do you think any of that danger will be long-lasting or permanent? And that's also a negative. So just rest a few days and have faith in your process. A lot of the parts of us that can do magic also have a lot of checks and balances. So it's easy to fuck ourselves up sometimes, but it's usually difficult to permanently fuck ourselves up. Like, a lot of the body we don't communicate consciously with is very invested in not dying or, becoming brain dead. All right, I will concentrate on Yahweh. Well, I can do a yes or no. So to Yahweh's question, is that an affirmative or a negative? Well, I'm getting a negative, as in a no, to whatever question you were asking. Never really done that before over a live stream. Like, kind of have. So I'm just going to say no or negative answer to whatever it is. So if I'm wrong or right, cheers. I wasn't promising anything with that one. Though usually you're welcome to hit me up privately if you want. I'm doing stuff. But yeah, I will say generally the information can be gotten, but if you're a little more specific, then that information can be a little better utilized and explored. Hello, Jen. So again, I've got my lovely familiar spirit, my partner in crime and magic, whose name is Amethyst, with me. So if you have any, especially things to do with magic and spirits, we love answering those questions. And since there's a couple people here, I am going back to designing my pendulum, I guess you'd call it a pendulum magic spirit course. I don't know if it's probably going to be a YouTube video and a little bit of writing. But basically I want to put together some coursework and guides to, find a pendulum or stone. I like pendulums because they can be objectively communicative. But it's the idea that you can attune to a pendulum and also awaken or call into a stone or material a spirit, how to grow and evolve that spirit, and how to communicate with it, and eventually get it to the level where you consider it a helper or a familiar or an intermediate spirit that you will then help you in your work, especially when it comes to communicating with other spirits, figuring out your magic, and developing systems of communication with not only that spirit, but with a lot of different forces. Because, honestly, knowledge is power. And being able the brain's very powerful, and spirits can integrate directly with your consciousness. You just have to understand how they do it. And once you understand how they do it, you can get better at it, and that skill can improve. And once you have a good dialogue with a spirit that you are mates with, like a familiar, it's really the sky's the limit. You can create your own systems and languages on how to translate raw data from the aether, so to speak, into ways that can tell you something useful about whatever subject you're working at. Not only for all their stuff, if we were talking about the drift and Hexorius and exploring the shadow side of your city or your city below, you don't need a pendulum. You can do it If you still need a physical thing, you can just use your hand. And when you're really good, you'll just know. Like, a lot of it is just training your intuition and your ability to kind of feel and move and manipulate your own etheric body and your spiritual senses. Like, at the end of the day, like, you can use a spirit inside a pendulum to eventually learn how to communicate directly mentally with that spirit, which is the easiest form of communication, through intent, through, you don't even need to articulate, like. And so it's a good stepping stone practice, and honestly, it's going to be good always for certain things. Yeah, but so if you guys are interested in that, you guys should send me an IM or a comment. So I'd really like to test dummy a couple of people. I've already got 1 or 2 test dummies, because I've never put together like a professional course of that, like, hey, A, B, C, D equals this skill. But I realize it's something that helped me a lot, that I was kind of taught through experimentation. And, all, good things should be shared, especially when they might be able to really help people. So yeah, I can't check messages right now, but if you guys, again, have any questions, you guys want me to read something else? I got like 50 of you here, and I'm just like chatting and shooting the shit. I guess I could give you, that story gave some pretty good examples on how to initiate the drift, or to move into the below, or the shadow side, or the magical consciousness of your city. I'm going to ask you guys, since there are a few DKMU guys, please drop the Hexorius sigil, and maybe and I'll do it later if you don't, but if you could, throw some resources for Hexorius and a link to the Hexorius group in the comments here, because I think it's one of my favorite of the DKMU, that is the Chaos Magic Organization, Domus Chaotica, Marauder Underground, that is kind of like where Hexorius is kind of located. It's in its realm. And it is one of its god forms, or kind of divine archetypical interfaces. So you can interface with that part of reality and its powers through its sigils and glyphs and stories. So yeah, put that down there, because that might benefit and help some people. So while you guys are still here, I guess I can read something. If my Mothman prophecy is right here, you're getting chapter 3, because I have been itching to read high strangeness to my regular occult friends since you guys, well, I already answered a few questions on the pendulums. Cheers, by the way, thank you for joining my live stream. It is really cool. Oh, thank you. But I don't know, I suppose I can read a little bit. You guys are having a good Saturday. So, okay. Mothman, or do you want to hear another chapter of Generation Hex? What we got? Trying to find something that's not too long. Thank you for putting up with my silence. Please go get your beer. Go get your beer alcoholic with me. Too long. All right. Gen Hex, you got it. All right, let's do this randomly. What we got? All right, here's a random one. It's called Opening and Closing the Psychedelic Temple. Actually, I don't want to read that one. I know, I'm fucking indecisive. Okay. we'll do Spooky Tricks by Jason Louv. Now, a couple of people have mentioned that Jason Louv, who, he wrote this when he was in his early 20s and he was a functional magician, has kind of gone off the deep end a little bit. But I don't know. That happens to a lot of magicians, and it doesn't really invalidate the work when they were tuned in. So I will say I got a lot out of this compilation when I was younger, and my friend Amanda gifted it to me out of the random. We were working together like last year. And Gen Hex was one of like my initiatory books, so I really like it. And I ended up buying like 50 of them, and I gave them away. And I gave my last copy away to an old girlfriend, and we lost touch, and then it went out of print. So I didn't read it for years. And now I'm in a far different, older, more mature place with myself and my practice. So revisiting this is interesting and I think valuable, because a lot of chaos magicians and magicians who aren't connected with like an order or tradition do a lot of work, but they don't have a good context for their own living tradition. And in I think any current of magic or spirituality, the living tradition, like the history of the current, is really important to know, to connect with. Like that longevity, that the fact that you are tuning into a work that is before you and will continue after you, makes it living. Like it makes it like DKMU, like the part of the DKMU have like the Red Queen and the Ellis current is often said as 156. They call it the 156 current, and there's the 663. And these are historically, at least in my opinion, related to the Gematria 156, which represents Babylon, and the Thelemic current. And you could say that the origins of that go back to Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard and Marjorie Cameron, I'm fucking up her name, and they did the Babylon work and supposedly manifested an elemental in the form of, invoked the goddess Babylon to physical form into a human in, I guess, the 50s, I think it was. And, from that point, a lot of weird shit has happened. Like, reality has shifted in really subtle ways. So when you say these currents of reality and how it's important to know them, because they might not change everything, but they change some things. They change little laws of how reality works. And that's something that you're tuning into for your magic, and you're participating in, and in some ways initiating in. So chaos magic has never been a solid tradition like, different traditions of Wudan or the Golden Dawn or even grimoire traditions in some ways. It's always been avant-garde, a bunch of goofy rando mages doing just strange, experimental, off-the-wall, genius magic. So, but chaos magic does have a living tradition, has a lot of them, and they're all wrapped in. So, I'll read some more Gen Hex, because to me that was one of my initiatory doors to that, and gave me a lot of confidence in what I was learning and experiencing when I was like 18 or 19. It's called Spooky Tricks by Jason Louv. They bring you down here into the world from outside. Then they teach you the words, and by that time you've already begun to forget magic. Sometimes it tries to come back to you, puts on the mask of an imaginary friend and calls to you from across the schoolyard, where they teach you lessons in self and submission. You can see the other place, the one where they know your true name, the place that this is only a reflection of when you close your eyes. It slides by in strange dreams, sometimes comes out through scribbles in the margins of your schoolwork, but then they teach you the word imagination, and it is not a real word, and it is not real. Welcome to the world. You grow up in front of the television. You grow up in front of the blackboard. You grow up wrapped in the black coils of the dragon, dumb, forgetful. When I grow up, I'm going to be a princess. When I grow up, I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a ballerina. Every day of your life, they teach you to forget your birthright. Hormones kick in and your body goes haywire with lust, hope, dreams, terror. When I grow up, I'm going to be on MTV. I'm going to be in the NBA. I'm going to be the president of the USA. On the edge of town, you sit on a hill with friends, looking down at the twinkling houses, tossing beer cans down into the darkness. Heart already grown hard. When I grow up, I'm going to get out of here. Go walking for hours with your hands in your pockets, staring at the ground, trying to remember something. There was something you forgot. Something you can almost remember, but not quite. Just on the periphery, an impossible itch. If you could just remember, everything would be different. You know it, the specter of real life hangs over you, cleverly named as if nothing but the 40-hour work week was actually real. All the toys and dreams must be put away now. You didn't really think you were special, did you? When I grow up, I'm gonna take what I get and learn to fucking like it. Did we forget something? Best not to think about it, really. Best to get on with life. After all, everybody knows that there is no such thing as magic. And what you see is always what you get. And so you become an adult by sole virtue of the number of years you have lived. You look for a place to glue yourself into the jigsaw, and you have already forgotten how to hear. And magic crouches in the barren tree outside your locked window, and slowly taps all night, saying, "Play with me. Play with me." Or maybe it doesn't get that far. Maybe you'll find it. Maybe you'll start to take it all seriously. The things like the skewed, maladjusted outcast kids talk about on the fringes of the schoolyard. It starts with that book you find in the back of the public library, the one about magic, real magic, that you read secretly under the table in math class. Or it starts with the voices that begin to come, or the certain certainty of unknown origin. And one day it makes perfect sense. How long have you been looking for it? And you try it. Try to do something to reality, and it works. And as your hope grows, you watch the lilting fingers of hell brush across the people in the school, dragging them down into gray mundanity, addiction, slavery, pregnancy, locked tight into the roles that have been constructed for them. And you realize that if there's any magic in this world, that you'll have to work for it harder than anything else you could ever work for, in order to never become like that, gray-eyed, dead to the world's mystery, chained to this waking nightmare, blood-trailing terror we call real life. In the back of the class, staring at them in disbelief, we realize the violini of this planet that will eat us whole if given half the chance. We come to the vision of sorrow and realize that hell exists. It is right beside us always. It waits to swallow us raw. And in the name of chaos, do you rise against the beast and declare yourself a crazy little child who disbelieves in it all, and you know that that is enough. We believe in your shadow play adult world that you create from paper and ink and flashing screens to convince us that we are powerless, saying over and over, "This is the way things are, this is the way things are." And you call yourself a magician because if this is reality, then you will make something unreal of yourself. And the more absurd, the better. And this is how we begin to discover the true order of things, and how we discover our true elders and our true names, and how we begin to see how much we truly have to learn. And cast into the wilderness beyond this fearful culture's walls, you wander and explore, mind reeling, chattering to yourself. In the whited-out forests, you glance your fear around the edge of a tree. And this hoodoo magic madness is real after all. It chases you, hounds you to the end. At night they come to you in dreams and show you the way, and you wander alone and crazy and full of it all until you begin to find the tracks of others in the sand. At night falls, you look for the glow of their fires, and then one day you find them, and that's where the real magic begins. The pure and violent mentation of the all. The quest for magic, which in the end may just be a word, has led me into some fairly odd places for a dorky kid from the suburbs to find himself in. The act of declaring myself a magician when I was 17, just for the sheer what-the-fuckness of it, to see if I could actually become something that wasn't supposed to exist, seemed to prompt such a response from the universe that despite the fact that I was thoroughly convinced that there was no such thing as magic, I shortly found myself spending hours constructing ornate after-school rituals, speaking to discarnate entities in the woods, hexing reality to get out of detention, and entering a bizarre, newly meaningful version of reality, lush with symbol, juxtaposition, telepathic impressions, and rhymes and puns of experience itself. In college, I pored through tens of thousands of pages of occult literature, trying to suss out the wisdom of the ages, figuring out how everything else stood in relation to it, uncovering a secret history to things. Tried my hand at using drugs and sex to provoke occult insight, tracked down and interrogated at length every magician I could find, which included most of my heroes. Spent every moment learning to control my mind, to direct my will and imagination. At a certain point, it became hard to pretend it was a game any longer, when real life seemed like the game now, the simple and plain mask to wear over the endlessly reflecting, recombining joyous self. Each new feint at the mystery opening a new ravine of potential and kinetic experience. I took myself apart and put myself back together, stripping away every lie I could find, every lie about how things were, or how I was supposed to be, or what magic was, over and over and over and over again, searching frantically for what could possibly be hiding underneath it all, until it felt like there was nothing left. I talked to spirits, I talked to demons, I talked to gods. Well, it's an adventure. It might be the last one going. Might be the only one that was ever going. Imagine my surprise when I found out that instead of securing myself a ticket to the little white room where they feed you little yellow pills, I had instead found in my entryway to a whole nother zone, a golden temple deep in the jungle with only the faintest signs and paths leading to it from the main roads, inhabited by crowds of people who were wondering what had taken me so long. So I rode the synchronicities to New York City, and the next thing I knew I was editing this book, since the opportunity just up and presented itself, and then ended up in London, holed up finishing school and assembling the book and trying to figure out what the fuck had happened to me. Still haven't really pieced that last one together, to be honest. I found myself gathered with the others in the back of dark pubs plotting out the future. I found myself dancing all night in the moors with witches on mushrooms and DMT, peering into the realm of the dead and into the future, and watching the aeonic flow begin to turn this world into exactly what it needs to be, and right on time, too. I found myself crunching the numbers, crunching the gematria, scoring the sacred books, rolling up my sleeves, and doing the magic way more than I ever had before, for hours and hours every day, sometimes all day, scratching around the numinous until it all exploded in the bliss and truth of Mayat. Now I want to pause because I haven't read this since I was 20, but, as some who know me, I often, tell people I'm like, above all, I consider myself a follower of Mayat. And, that force and that goddess, which represents that force, plays a huge part in my heart and my practice. And it seems to with a lot of other people too. So running back and hearing that right now in this way, just, it does make me smile a little bit in a synchronous kind of way. Continuing. I followed it across Europe to the Roman ruins that only looked like they'd fallen yesterday, to the Vatican where I poured my blood into the fountains of holy water, to the old city of Prague where they made the Golem, and where Vin Diesel made XXX. I rode the maniacal shark of my desire from the dusty back corners of the library of my childhood all the way to the foothills of Mount Everest, and there, sitting in the dust watching the sun set over the ravines and valleys of Nepal, I sat with a girl, reading a book a Tibetan Lama had given me, helping her practice her English as she laboriously traced out a line of a Vajra song with her fingers and read it right back to my face. How can you suppose to have sway over others if you do not have sway over your own mind? And so I found myself in India, sunburnt, walking amongst the oceanside shrines of Mumbai, stepping over the dying, fly-covered children carpeting the city streets. I found myself in Goa, wandering the deserted beaches under gray skies, convinced I found the edge of the world. I found myself sitting in Varanasi, every circuit burnt, watching bodies cremate on the Ganges for a week, staring at the vivid futurism of the skulls turning black, staring at the bloated bodies of sadhus floating down the river. I found myself on the back of a camel in the great Thar desert, riding into the red sun, convinced I had found the edge of myself. Consciousness turned into pure white noise. camped in the middle of the sands in the middle of the night, staring at the crescent moon in the sky, right above my sleeping camel. It was a tarot card. It was perfect. And at this point, a giant plastic towel flies out of a portal and smacks our narrator in the yap, which he promptly shuts. We notice a 99 cents made in Taiwan sticker on the back. Well, magic. It sure is an adventure. Yes, indeed. Proposition 1. The lowest common denominator definition of magic, that sticking pins in a voodoo doll will reproduce corresponding pains in the person it is a model of, contains the whole doctrine of ritual magic in miniature. Our nervous systems are our models of our universe. Therefore, making changes to our nervous systems will produce corresponding changes in the universe, and vice versa. True, on more levels than that, but very much so. Proposition 2. Spiders weave webs, beavers build dams, and people make magic. They manifest meaning and structure from nothingness. The world is pure magic. It is the image of our DNA. Writ large in manifestation. It is our sigil and what we have chosen to make with our time. Excuse me. That's what I made with my time. The stupas of Lhasa are no more magical than the infernal machinery of New York. It's all what we've chosen to bring forth from ourselves. It's all relative, and it's all us. Hunting dust. The following is a general theory of magical initiation drawn from my own personal experience, reading and interactions with other magicians. Though magic can never be fully described, it is by definition beyond definitions. The following model seems to be a good fit for the initial stages. From the first learning to speak until the age of 6 or 7, children enter what Swiss developmental psychologist Jean Piaget, I think I said that wrong, Piaget, called the pre-operational stage, more generally known as magical thinking. It is in this stage of development that the child believes that the universe is a manifestation of the self. According to Dr. Benjamin Spock, in a young child's view, it is very possible that it rains because the sky is sad. If your baby brother gets sick and goes to the hospital, it could be your fault if you were mad at him the day before. If you want something very, very badly and it happens, then your wanting caused it to happen. These are examples of magical thinking. There are also examples of egocentric thinking. Not that the young child is selfish. It's just that he cannot take anyone else's perspective, so that everything in the world revolves around him. When he's sad, he cries, so it must be that the sky does too. This state is characterized by the onset of symbolic thought, in which one thing can represent or correspond to another, and marked by the sense that everything, including inanimate objects, is alive and sentient, and capable of emotion and feeling. Studying this mode of operation in animistic cultures, conducting their affairs at the level of magical thinking, early anthropologist Sir James Frazer isolated the basic components of magic as the law of similarity, that like produces like, and that, in effect, resembles its cause. Rehearsing a desired event in ritual will cause that event to happen in actuality. In the law of contact or contagion, that anything that has been in contact will remain in contact, no matter what the physical distance is. Example, a person may be affected by actions taken towards their hair, nails, or blood, or a corporation by its logo. It is on these principles that all sorcery is worked. The child experiences herself as awash in divinity, and partaking in divinity and the secret connections between things. And because of the limits of both her own cognitive development and those of monotheistic cultures, which most developing children are unfortunately liable to find themselves in, she is unable to recognize that everybody else around her may just be just as godlike. It makes me pucker. This state, of course, cannot be supported in a healthy environment, as it prevents empathy or any kind of social ordering. If taken to its limits, magical thinking at this level of totemic superstition and the presupposition that whatever one does is correct because one is omnipotent and divine will quickly end in the career of a serial killer or an American president. The pre-operational stage is quickly replaced by the concrete operational stage, in which the child begins to think logically and in organized patterns about concrete events, and loses the previous intuitive and egocentric focus. The joke is, though, that despite its social limitations, the pre-operational stage may provide a much clearer picture of how the universe actually runs than its concrete and abstract operational successors, which are more concerned with how social interaction runs. Compare, for instance, Fraser's laws of similarity and contagion with Bell's theorem, which shows that physical reality is non-local. It is only through the loss of magical thinking that one can truly individuate and learn to work with other people and come to healthy functioning in modern society. Yet a loss it is, and if one were to find themselves dead-ended behind some anonymous checkout counter, stumbling home every night to find some kind of succor in light beer and television, the only place left where magic is real, one could hardly be blamed for wanting exactly what it was that went amiss. Which brings us to magic proper, as in that entertaining, sexy, meaningful, futuristic lifestyle we know and love. Magicians tend to be people who couldn't quite let go of that childhood wonder, who never quite forgot that feeling of being less separate from their experience. These people often first seek to re-enchant their world, grow gray since childhood, with the tactical use of art, poetry, music, sex, drugs, or some other mode of inflaming the imagination, before sensing the vast hidden order of things which lies just beyond the imagination and the possible, the hidden order of which the imagination is a sensory organ for making exploratory forays into. Magic then becomes a disciplined quest to recover the state of magical thinking and claim all of its eccentric treasures, and to break the chains of social conditioning and static personality that have made one less than immanently divine. Armed with the ability to live as a functional adult in mundane reality, the individual can now make a safe return to the doorstep of magical thinking, and reclaim the spark of divinity within them that, though likely a bit scuffed up by religion, education, media, processed junk food, and the daily erosion of life on this planet, will provide no less of a nuclear incident when touched. The reintegration of this outlook on life, along with a more stable viewpoint, then becomes the initial task of the budding magician, that is, making space for magic itself to manifest and gaining a foothold in that other place. Reintegration is not an easy task. One largely has to go against everything one has been taught about the world. One has to find a way of safely unlearning the neat boundaries that have been placed around the possible. The multitudes of magical training systems that abound in the world represent general, customizable guidelines for doing this. Hello, Amanda. You actually missed me reading all of the Beneath the Pavement, the Beast, and then some talkie. And now I'm reading Spooky Tricks by Jason Louv, also from Gen Hex. But you could definitely go back and watch it after, or you could hit me up and I could read it again to you privately. Moving on. The crucial difference between the original state of magical thinking and the new one of magical action is that the individual is able to conceive of a universe in which all are God, though some may be forgetful of this, and in which all is one in infinite diversity. The newborn magician has empathy, and as such is able to find appropriate ends to direct their effort towards, and magic works. The magician has returned to the childhood world of wonder, awe, and magic, with all the organizational and emotional skills of the adult. He has gazed upon the face of God and found her not to be a commanding, authoritarian legislator, but instead a constantly growing, learning and exploring androgynous child on an adventure. I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 18:3. This is the first synthesis. This is where it starts, when one gains access to the magical world, a slipstream which lies just 1 inch beyond the possible, in a world only a child, crazy person, or artist would so dare to believe in. One will quickly find the game takes on a life of its own. One moment, pause. Needed some water, not beer. Where was I? Ah, the next part. I swear they had a shaved horse dancing on the stage with them. Casting a magic spell is easy. The basic mechanism goes like this. You decide what you want. This is often the hardest part. You make the desire as precise as you possibly can and make sure that it has a route for manifestation. You then make a symbolic representation of that desire occurring. A mantra, a hand movement, a dance, a piece of art or music, or a simple symbol on a piece of paper. Some form of trance state is then entered through prolonged sex, certain drugs, dancing, meditation, yoga, drinking lots of questionable energy drinks, or any other method. And the whole of the self is focused upon this symbolic representation, so that the whole of the universe for a time is nothing but that symbol, sent down to the deep levels of manifestation. Ceremonial magic, once taken out of its medieval context, is an incredibly effective and fun method for this, the idea being to completely overload all of the senses, sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch, with content directly symbolizing one's intent, until complete shutdown of the conscious apparatus. After completing one's working, you then forget what you have done. Your desire tends to enter your reality as soon as it leaves your head. This process works remarkably well. That's really all you need to know about magic. It's motor oil to decrease the friction of life and give you control over how you spend your precious time on this planet. Of course, there's more. There's always more. The more you do, and the more you exteriorize your desire into the world, the more you are, essentially, exteriorizing your own mind. The most visible example of this is the increasingly implausible synchronicities that begin to pile up the more you combine intent and trance. This is the awakening of a faculty of mind that dwells beneath and beyond the observed world. The data registered by our sensory organs is processed and assembled by the brain into the somewhat cohesive whole that we perceive. Our realities are therefore 100% subjective. They are wholly fabrications by the brain, which must sort out our observations and memory into a personality functional enough to allow our continued survival. That means there is no difference between anything when viewed from a wide enough angle. It is all a product of the brain. Our self is no different from its environment. It's all the same thing. All is mind. So if the world starts talking to you, don't freak the fuck out or anything. It's just reminding you that it's also a part of you, and not to treat it as separate. Mysticism is the mastery of the self by interiorization. Magic is the mastery of self by exteriorization. Magic won't make you lose your mind, but it will relocate it outside of your body. How could you lose it when it's right there in front of your face? There's more, of course. There's always more. How to take the high road. It is our will to be enwrapped in the divine schematics of the universe, blasted out across the mantle of heaven, burning in ecstasy until the dinner bell rings. Our dreams and our nightmares alike call us home, and it is there that we go. Through our art do we unify the world of the imagination and the world of the real until, meeting face to face, a third world is born in their annihilation. Our tactics are all-encompassing, mastering the tools of this world, all its tricks of status and aspiration. Do we stand above them with our veins coursing with the blood of the prophets? That is our birthright. Our mandate as human beings is nothing less than to swallow the stars. The magician must outsmart the system that is the system of creation itself. I stood on Sunset Boulevard, on the path of concrete where River Phoenix died, and as I called out to it all, I thought, there will be time enough for all of our dreams. Our hearts are nothing when weighed against this world. Between Scylla and Charybdis. The training of the magician begins the moment they wholeheartedly embrace such an irrational and romantic calling. It is not a choice made fully consciously, and often has begun months or even years before the technical processes of the occult have been encountered. Those who will in later life declare themselves to be magicians, or whatever you want to call it, it has different names in all times and places, will have often been marked from early childhood by strange qualities, high sensitivity, strange obsessions, an overactive imagination, and an inability to fully mix with other children. However, looking to the past for a causal explanation of the present is misleading, as the magician's initiation is conducted by his or her transcendental self, which has very little to do with a lowercase s self we normally experience in 4 dimensions. This self, capital S, is what is responsible for the awakening and dissolution of the individual, and will use anything available, books, music, movies, your environment, people in your life, ambient information, dreams, life experiences, to lead you directly towards it as an ever-tightening synchronic net. It is the full identification and unity with this entity, your self-made God. Self-made God, not a self-made God. That is the true goal of magic. Research and discernment are a must. False identification or missing the boat altogether would be unfortunate. When one looks around, one begins to realize that this experience is universal to all people, in all times and places, and that almost everybody except you is in the process of doing it or has already done it. Can you read the shockwaves? I am that I am. We seek the luminous through any and all means possible. We find everything to be true, everything to be permitted, to be so jacked up on magic that reality itself bends around you when you enter the room. This is the goal. We find the following tactics useful. Initiation. The universe gets as giddy as a schoolgirl with ADHD after eating 6 bowls of Fruit Loops with Red Bull substituted for milk when we respectfully make the leap into magic and offer to play with the cosmos on its own terms. Magic lies between us and the universe, right here, right now, this instant, and always has. Remember to breathe. Love saves the universe every time. Step the first, step the last. Relax, trust, love, silence. The sixth sense. The sixth sense is nothing more than the human imagination, raised to a fever pitch and trained as a scientific organ. The imagination is the sensory array that we use to contact not only our own hopes, aspirations, and manifolds of self, but also the shared dream time of our social units and ultimately of our species. There is no such thing as something that is just in your head, or just anything. The imaginary is a shared space which everybody accesses all of the time, as the internet has shown in a metaphorical physical form. Once this is grasped, the phenomena of telepathy, ESP, and precognition, as well as the more occult aspects of advertising and the media, suddenly begin to make sense. The otherworld. Access through mirrors, trance, ritual, proper living, art, and some drugs. The less said, the better, as nothing can be verified, and in all likelihood it is a territory that cannot be mapped. Often aligns with the mundane world and manifests spontaneously through coincidence and the feel of things. When you were a kid in the back seat of the car on a long ride, staring out at the landscape flashing by and everything was made strange, but like home, like the best kind of dream, you saw the door. The land on the other side of the door is inhabited. Mapping the psychocosm. Magic, or spiritual growth, is accompanied or accomplished by going deeper and deeper inside oneself, while simultaneously expanding more and more one's agency within the world. The inward turn yearns towards death, the overcoming of the illusory self in the silence of the mind. The outward turn yearns towards love, the overcoming of the illusory self in unity with each other. Chemical warfare. Viva la revolution! Drugs are hardly necessary for magic, but can often act like social grease and rocket fuel for its processes. They also have their pitfalls, the finer points of which shouldn't need to be repeated to an educated audience. These are not merely issues of personal safety and comfort, but also political ones. Not only can drug culture be potentially blamed for some of the failures of the movements of the 1960s, but drugs, mainly meaning marijuana, cocaine, and heroin, are at this point such a critical component of the web of narco-militarism and violence that runs this planet, that becoming part of the consumption chain is in many cases supporting the wrong people, whether that means Al-Qaeda or the Central Intelligence Agency. unless you knew exactly who grew or made what you're consuming. To imbibe any illegal, or in many cases legal, drugs potentially means imbibing human misery, poverty, slavery, torture, and murder. On the other hand, to claim that the use of consciousness-expanding drugs, especially naturally occurring psychedelics, has not been a primary driving force in human culture since prehistory, or that they cannot lead to peak experiences of tremendous meaning and lasting benefit, would be lying. To say that any substance is inherently good would also be pretty far from the truth. A very large part of the population has at least some experiences of consciousness-expanding drugs. Those who use them intelligently, or even who use them for magic, are exceedingly rare. While drugs can be an important catalyst in magic, it should be added, they are certainly not the point or the end state, or even essential to its workings. Altered states, however, are essential, and though drugs may be the easiest way, they are also the hardest to direct towards productive ends. Peter J. Carroll, one of the originators of chaos magic, made the foundation stone of his approach that altered states of consciousness are the key to magical power, and it is indeed altered states of all forms that we seek to cultivate. The human nervous system is the best toy in the world, and we are here to explore and innovate with it. This is true on more than just the individual level. Cultures are largely defined by the types of altered states they seek to cultivate en masse, and also those that they seek to avoid. In the post-industrialized world, that tends to mean the sexual territorial thrash of alcohol, the frantic competitive, mechanical acceleration and paranoia of caffeine, refined sugar, cocaine, and amphetamines, the flattened alpha wave vegging out of passively staring at a flickering screen, socially constricted and constructed sexual expression, the vicarious mass aggression of sporting events, and the oil-dependent trance of driving an automobile. The history of magic and Gnosticism can be seen, on one level, as the history of the exploration of new, altered states of consciousness. The counter-conspiracy to cultural hegemony has often been to monkey with its bloodstream. Jazz, rock and roll, acid house, hip-hop culture, the sexual revolution, the internet, body modification, the mass popularity of marijuana, LSD, and MDMA, all spearheaded by those following the Gnostic impulse of a reconnection with something beyond the world of illusion. We have all opened suggestive doors of new possibility in the previous century, doors that are now either taxed, policed, or closed altogether, though they have all been axles upon which individual consciousness and history have been revolutionized. The stuff just grows, no matter what they do to clamp down on it. The forms of altered consciousness that we choose to pioneer and engineer for ourselves and our social groups over the coming decades will determine what doors are opened for us and how our stories are written. It is through the group-experienced, intent-driven altered state that the magical world is most strongly aligned with the mundane one. Got any ideas? Sorcery. Remembering by amnesis, anamnesis, soul memory, that all is one. One intuits that all may be affected from anywhere at any time in any way. It is hardly mystic, you are simply more than you think you are. Attempting to change your corner of the cosmic game with magic can create opportunities, but it's still up to you to take them, even if they are inside you. Divination. Remembering by anamnesis that all is one, one intuits that any information about the totality may be gained from any fragment anywhere, at any time, in any way. Holographic universe principle. That right there is one of, if you're thinking about divination in anything, remember that one. I can't say that, remember, that is super fucking important on so many levels, and if you internalize it, it's going to open a lot of ability to do a lot of cool things. Divination systems tend to be a training system for a psychic faculty that will cease to need props after a certain point. Just say that. I did. Divine the future in the clouds, the rustling of the wind through the trees, your dreams. Better yet, listen directly to your heart. Beasties. It is a very cute and androcentric contrivance of the postmodern, i.e. sarcastic, approach to magic, that anything that is not immediately visible is of necessity created and sustained by human belief. This is only feasible from the perspective of the non-dual experience. Try to stop believing in street-level reality and see what that gets you. One is at a loss as to what spirits, egregores, demons, angels, gods, great old ones, etheric floaters, Loa, secret chiefs, and other discarnate intelligences are, but experience has shown them to exist independently of the human mind. Not that anything can ever be truly proven to exist outside of the human mind. They may appear to be psychological metaphor up to a point, but beyond that, things start turning all eerie Indiana. The nature of praeter-human intelligences is perhaps the central riddle of the whole magic game. When venturing into Faeryland, one is recommended to have one's wits together at all times. Exercise discretion and don't step out of the circle. Invoke to balance, not exaggerate. And remember that if you invite them in, discarnate intelligences can quickly stop being discarnate. Sticking it where it don't belong. When performing any magic action whatsoever, be prepared ahead of time to get exactly what you asked for. And don't be surprised when things turn out much more literally than you thought they would. I got one more part and then my phone's going to die. Actually, hold on for 1 second. Let me get my plug in. I need the power. Come back to me. Alright, that might keep it alive on 3%. No. Can't. Alright, you have to deal with it like that. 1 second. Come on. Well, I guess I have to do it like this. Alright. This might die anyway. No promises. But we're not too far along. Magicitis. If a black cat crosses your path, it's bad luck. If a dragonfly does, it's good luck. To the superstitious mind. Certain events have occult meanings. To the magical mind, all events have occult meanings. Under extreme magical consciousness, every street number is immediately broken down and reconstituted through gematria into Kabbalistic patterns. Every stain in the pavement becomes a rune. Every advertisement is trying to reprogram your soul. The fragments of lyrics from the radios of passing cars are talking directly to you. All world events in the intricacies of pop culture are taken to be the signs and portents of aeonic progression. Every movement of the mind is the passing shadow of something huge and luminous. Literalism, quite dangerously, is often not far behind. Navigating this is an ongoing part of the magical experience. Laughter is key here, learning to laugh at existence and at oneself. The neuro-linguistic programming concept of the state break can also be useful, derailing unwanted trains of thought by some sudden, random, and absurd action. We float. The primary logical fallacy in magic is the establishment of one-to-one relationships between signifiers and signifieds. Give it a rest. There are never easy answers, as all initiated symbols and text can be interpreted on several levels and from several angles. Occult symbols and concepts are not read with the conscious mind. They are read with the entire entity in all 4 basic dimensions. They are read with the totality of one's experience, and hence none of it means anything in and of itself. The meaning dwells in the relationship you establish with that symbol in the moment. This applies exponentially more to magical and paranormal experiences. The otherworld turns to address the easy caress of metaphor rather than the pornography of fact. Magic exists in and partakes of the character of in-betweenness. It exists in the blank spaces between the sentences, between the personalities, between the facts of the matter. In the third mind, those who can dwell in the blankness between the worlds and the numbers will be forever free. Rule number 1 of living in the 21st century. Whether or not you believe in magic or not, or whether or not magic is viable as a scientific discipline, and whether or not magic is real or not as your own opinion. But it doesn't matter one single bit, because politics, pop culture, and advertising don't work along any rules except the rules of magic. Conspiracy theory and arcane symbolism. Multiple choice question. Which is the most powerful magician? 1. The ritualist standing at her altar, conjuring with her 4 magic weapons, wand, cup, dagger, and pentacle. 2. The ritualist standing at her altar, her life, conjuring with her 4 weapons, wand, willpower, cup, intuition, sword, discrimination, and pentacle, material resources. 3. The ritualist standing at her altar, the masses, conjuring with her 4 weapons, wand, the media, cup, consensus, trance, sword, laws and military, and pentacle, the economy. 4. The ritualist standing at her altar, the world, conjuring with her 4 weapons, wand, active individuals, cup, passive masses, sword, warfare, and pentacle, planetary resources. Actually, if you guys are listening, you should definitely answer this question. It's a point. 5. The ritualist standing at her altar, spirit, conjuring with her 4 weapons, wand, fire, cup, water, sword, air, and pentacle, earth. Time. Through magic we reorient ourselves in time, investigate ourselves in our many facets, reach around corners. We ponder the past, seek its secret threads and what it can tell us about who we are. Hello, Tiffany K. We try to live fully for the moment, be conscious only of the eternal present. And sometimes we make plans for the future, write our little magic spells, aim high, set goals, and it all works out now, doesn't it? And in the overlaps and blank spots of our binding of time in the static, the real magic is made. In this human condition, we try to decipher our sadness, ask our mortality and weakness for its name, and our sorrow is nothing save time itself. Stumbling through inner London in the rain, alone and crazy from the magic, I came upon something safe. In an abandoned playground in the shadow of the council flats, I found a worn stone circle, a hollow carved out in the center, overflowing with rainwater. I had been locked up in my room doing the magic and trying to unravel the puzzles of eternity, and here in front of me was this offering bowl, the writing carved above it, reading simply, "To catch them and be filled again and again and again." And this was magic. And when I looked around me at the empty metal bars of the playground and knew that this was not raindrops, but children that would be caught and held safe, I understood that this was real magic. Stark, feminine force, a reality as hard and unyielding as the concrete waiting underneath the wars, the stock market, and our rebellion in this playground earth to catch us all, underneath all the games and the words. This was surely the work of a master builder. The magic connections we weave underneath the world seeming, the intelligence that peers in and laughs at our little games. The bedside manner. After the primary initiations, one is urged to move the focus away from the self. A watched-over pot never boils, after all, and will is never perfected when it is divided in self-examination. There are infinite masks for a magician to wear, but ultimately it is what you add to the lives of those close to you that you will be judged by. The days of the solitary magician sitting at home, maniacally charting Kabbalistic datum or sitting in the computer discussion shifting the dominant paradigm with invisible others are over. While all magical systems are to be considered fodder for research and fuel for activation, the only thing that will matter in this century is what you do with magic. If you want to change reality, then do it. The dominant trait of the new breed is severe professionalism. Those magicians with sufficiently interesting personal style will become the rock stars and fashionistas of this era, as nobody has been before. Most effective of all will be well-funded invisible collectives of individuals. As they said in Godfather 2, this is the business we have chosen. Affirm the unexplainable with every passing instant. The most frightening moment of all may be the one in which you are taken seriously. Mythological, religious, and scientific truth. Use whatever is most effective. They are props. The true goal would be to create your own mythology, your own science, your own religion from the stuff of will, imagination, and direct, unprejudiced experience of life. Easier said than done. Never be afraid to ask the big questions. High magic. Turn any television set to the static of any empty channel. The hissing patterns you will see is a 7.3 centimeter radio signal emitted by the Big Bang, cosmic microwave background radiation made up of photons that has spent the last 15 billion years cooling from that hot instant. The black and white fuzz of the eternal dual principle, split off from that original unity, that first spark, hissing across the screen in endless interplay, like a game of Go, creating trinities, quadrinities, creating all that is through their dance. It is here the face of creation in every living room, right there in between the newscasters and the stars. Turn up the volume and listen to the hiss, in the symbology of the imminent aeon of Maat, of reintegration of spirit into matter. This is the swan, symbol of firstness, Keter, of regality and purity, who, when approach, chased you from the pond, hissing forth of the viciousness of creation itself. This is the image of the beginning, unveiled before our furtive gaze. Since the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics posits that light is neither wave nor particle until it is observed as either, or that things are neither black or white, one way or another until observed as such, then this shows that by observation, our origin, we are changing it, that by observing our past, we are creating our present. Our gaze, after all, is as concrete of a thing as what it regards. The participatory anthropic principle, going even further, suggests that the observation of the universe is what is required to make it real. Through staring into that primal chaos, we are bringing it order, and so is the great work performed in every instant's gaze. I see that, therefore I am that. The final anthropic principle, last in this trio of weird sisters, suggests that universes must produce intelligence in order for that intelligence to observe the creation of the universe and so make it real. This is an eternal intelligence, an eternal mind, which is the endpoint of the universe's evolution, intelligence beyond that of the human. God is not in the machine. We are the machine that will create God. And this is magic. By observation we create. By investing with meaning do we give form. By physical enactment do we make manifest. And what we observe is the infinite, here for us to create, whatever we wish from. The Spirit of God moving over the face of the waters. And with each passing instant do we create eternity. Om. Hee hee. Your point is, every man and every woman is a star. Every man and every woman is God, creating the totality of the universe they perceive in every instant, whether they are aware of it or not. We are all already playing God, and we are all already gods. We just have to remember how to access that part of which partakes of that boundless, non-local divinity. In that non-local space will you find the voices of the light, if you know how to listen. What the divine isn't the point. The language fails by definition, as it exists on a higher plane than words. It could be DNA. It could be the morphogenetic field. It could be the holy guardian angel. It could be Christ, Krishna, Atman. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, because it is the voice of intelligence which guards and guides our progression. An intelligence which knows far, far better than any one of us or any collection of us as a group what is best for us. The voice of love is unmistakable. In the entire history of the human quest for truth and meaning can be shaken down to one statement, stamped on the forehead of the entire universe, so it has to see it every time it looks in its rusty bathroom mirror, and that is, love is the secret of the universe. End of fucking story. End of story. You have now graduated from consciousness expansion class forever. Love is the Qibla of evolution and divinity. When adrift in its slipstream, caught in the love realms of the Angelians, we have our purest understanding of things. We have certainty, the love of the universe, the love of the future, the love of each other. Setting goals. Create positive change on this planet, or shut your mouth. The end. And that was Spooky Tricks by Jason Louv. So, thank you for watching, and I'm going to try, hopefully Facebook doesn't make this whole thing disappear, so I'm going to download the video, and I'm going to try to publish it to YouTube. So I've been reading a lot, and I'm about done with my beer. I've read Beneath the Pavement, The Beast, by Stephen Grasso, and Spooky Tricks by Jason Louv, both from Generation Hex, an anthology of essays and writings by young magicians published in the early 2000s, compiled by Jason Louv. A really good book. Good luck finding it. It's been out of print, but I will be slowly reading more of it over time, so feel free to add me. I have a group that I will post below for anybody interested in magic and experimenting on any of that level and outside the box, called the Free Magician Society. And you guys are all welcome to join if you haven't already and participate and talk about weird shit. But I really appreciate you listening and hanging out. So, and any of you guys, if you're here and you're listening, then we should collaborate. We should be friends. And I'm happy you guys are here right now. And I will be back with more live streams soon. Maybe reread the Mothman prophecies just to spite the men in black. Thank you. Have a good one, okay? Feel free to message me now or whenever I'm around. Bye.